Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to CASAS Assessments for Citizenship Preparation webinar. My name is Sharon Bonney, and I'm the Executive Director for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. I'd like to let everybody know that all webinar participants will receive a certificate of attendance. This is going to go out to you tomorrow around 3 o'clock. And also the materials that we are going to be showing on this webinar will also be posted on the COAAP website as well. Further, you can download other resources from this webinar and previous webinars at our Adult Educators repository, and there is the link right there. You can see it's www.coaap.org, and just look for the educators resources. For those of you who are not attending COAAP, I'd like to welcome you to join us next week. We're going to be in our sunny Orlando, Florida. We're expecting more than 2,000 attendees from all over the country, so we hope that you'll be able to join us there. And finally, our COAAP elections for the Board of Directors is going on right now. You're welcome to vote for the board members of your choice. Just go to coaap.org/elections. So without further ado, I would like to just take a minute here to thank our sponsor, which is New Readers Press. And I'd like to turn this over to Terry Lipke for just a couple minutes.
Hi, everybody. Some of you probably know me. I've been around at conferences. I am the editorial director at New Readers Press. And before Jennifer gets started, I just wanted to take a minute to show you our citizenship materials. We have a literacy skills book at a very low level to help students who don't know a lot of English vocabulary yet. The Civics and Literacy book that covers the 100 questions, and then Ready for the Interview, which is up to date with the latest version of the N-400 form. So these books are aligned to CASAS, and they're available on our website at newreaderspress.com. And I won't take up a lot of Jennifer's time now. I know she has a great presentation planned. So thank you very much for coming.
Terry, thank you so much. And I just wanted to mention that thanks to New Readers Press' generous support, we're able to provide these webinars. So thank you, New Readers Press. Without further ado, I will turn this over to Jennifer Gagliardi, who is our featured presenter. Jennifer?
Hi, my name is, hi, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Gagliardi. I'm with Milpitas Adult School, which is a very small adult school just north of San Jose, California. I also do technical training for OTEM, which is our state agency to help adult educators learn more about technology. A copy of this PowerPoint and further material is available at my website, uscitizenpod.com. And if you have any questions after the presentation, of course, you can email me at jgagliar, JGAGLIAR@musd.org. So the first question is, what is CASAS? And I'm sure a lot of people know this from Kahoot. You see the red, blue, yellow, and green. CASAS, there has been different versions of CASAS, but of course, CASAS means Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment Systems. So we use CASAS in conjunction with TOPS Pro to basically keep track of the demographics of our students and also to assess them for placement and to see how they are doing within the school system. CASAS, the point of the main goals of CASAS is helping us to assess English language learners, for especially adults. From the assessments, the teachers basically analyze the information. We are able to basically tailor instruction to help students to learn more specifically. We can see what their strengths are, we can see what their weaknesses are, and we can help them achieve their goals. Many of our students do want to progress further in workforce training. Some students do go on to college, but the point is that they choose their goals and they achieve their goals. And CASAS gives them a structure to do that with them. I want to talk a little bit about WIOA accountability assessments. And I'm going to focus most of my comments about citizenship because I do teach a citizenship ESL class, and I teach a citizenship class. With citizenship class, a lot of times you have to take a pre-test, a post-test, and these are trying to assess the English ability of the student. And also there are further assessments that I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about the CASAS Citizenship Interview test, which is an oral test where a teacher or assessor is basically interviewing a student. And this is based on a citizenship interview or what you might see on the N-400. And also they have the listening tests. So there's basically 4 assessments that I would talk about. If you need further information about the requirements for CASAS, if you need to know specifically about pay points or some of the requirements and qualifications to participate in their civics or citizenship prep programs, please take a look at this presentation from CASAS and focus on slides 9 through 21. I want to talk about some of the pre-tests or the English test assessments that they're going to take. And I want to talk about how these can basically help students achieve their goals. So this is one of our adult schools outside of our school. She's basically saying, hey, I want a citizenship class, and this is what she's thinking. However, what's the first thing that we do? They're taken into a computer lab and they have to take a CASAS test, which is basically assessing their ESL or their literacy level. And a lot of students are quite put off by this. They're saying, hey, I'm here to learn about the 100 questions. My test is coming up, all sorts of things. So there's a lot of mixed feelings coming into this test. However, what is the point of taking a look at these English tests? The CASAS Life Work series is basically trying to assess the students' level of English, and there is a very strong correlation between the things that are asked on the USCIS N-400 Application for Naturalization and the CASAS test. Very quickly, what is talked about on the N-400, they ask you about personal information, they ask you about where a person lives, where the person works, travel, family, and then they ask a series of questions related to seeing if a person would be a good U.S. citizen. On a CASAS test, we also see similar questions. Say, for instance, the ones that I focused on here, they ask you questions here about jobs or schools. Now, these questions also appear on the N-400, and they also ask you about money or financial support. So on every level in each one of the CASAS tests, they're asking you questions about jobs, school, or financial support. These are questions that are very real and basically do appear again when they go through their interview process. Let me give you an example of a very basic literacy test. So this is basically when we have people come in, they might know their alphabet, but when they sit there, this is one of the requirements that CASAS has. Students need to use capitalization as a clue to interpret words. So for instance, on the CASAS test itself, it might be matching a capital A with a small a. So that might be one of the things that, one of the initial questions that are asked. But also then they're asked, for instance, what identify a personal name from, or they might show you a personal name and they'll ask you, hey, is this a name? Is this an address? Is this a city? Is this a state? So, so this would be an example, or something like it would appear on a CASAS 27R, a very basic CASAS test. Where do you see this on the N-400? Of course, you see this as part when you basically enter your family name, your personal name, and your middle name. And also you see this when you sign your N-400. So that is very, very important. So this is something that would probably be 5 years down the line from when the student first came in and took one of the initial CASAS tests. Also, where do they see this? Every year we have a celebration called or there's a celebration for Constitution Day and Citizenship Day. This is celebrated on September the 17th. So what our school does, we hang up big posters of the Constitution, we put out parchment and students sign their names, basically saying that they support the Constitution and that they will follow the laws of the United States. So during these 3 weeks, not only are we CASAS testing our students and placing them in different levels of class, but also we're taking this opportunity in the first 3 weeks of school to inform the students what is in the Constitution, what are their rights, and so this is basically an introduction to life in the United States, and we use that as an opportunity to talk to the students about their rights. And also we spend a lot of time filling out forms during this time. Again, this is stuff that also appears on the CASAS test. So there's a real interesting dynamic between what's being assessed, what's being celebrated, and here is the N-400 is a gatekeeping document for citizenship. An example of a much higher test is the CASAS 185, and you're trying to interpret authentic materials on familiar topics. So this might be a when you see the 185R, this is basically a sign advertising fingerprinting. And this is one of the steps towards citizenship when the students get their fingerprinting appointment letter and they go and basically have to make arrangements when they are going to actually be fingerprinted. Sample questions that might appear in reference to this, this sign would be, where do you go, or what day do you go to which room, and when do you need an appointment? And this is an example, as you can see on the left, my student's fingerprint appointment notice. I happened to have, this was before we did e-testing, we usually had the students in the class taking their CASAS ESL or work-life series test together in groups, sitting at different tables. And as I was circulating through the room monitoring the test, I got a big elbow in the side of my in the side. And that's something you don't. It was very surprising. That usually doesn't happen during a test, but the student basically whips out her citizenship appointment letter, and she had open in front of her the appointment letter on the in the CASAS test itself. So she said, hey, this is real. What is on the test is happening in my life right this very second. And she was so happy. Fortunately, we had to stop the test and basically return the room to a good test taking mode. but again, it was just a really important moment in her life. And so it's interesting when things actually pop out of the test and into people's real life. So again, a very interesting dynamic. In fact, here's probably my students taking, well, I don't think they're, they might be taking a CASAS test. They're taking a listening test. As you can see, the old version in the middle of the table, the old version of the New Readers Press books. Again, I use New Readers Press. I really enjoy their materials, and I will come back to that at a later point. The three assessments that I would like to talk about initially is the reading test, the listening test, and the interview test. And I will be speaking more about the interview test, and then after that I will be talking about some of the COSMOS assessments that we use in our ESL classes that can be applied for citizenship. The reading test for citizenship, it's basically geared towards low-level beginning ESL students. They're testing reading comprehension, and they have reusable test books. We do not use this in the citizenship. We used to use this in our citizenship class long ago. However, we're using the work-life assessments instead right now. So this is an example of what you might see on one of their tests. You might see a picture of a quarter or a dollar bill, and the student would identify, is it a dime, nickel, penny, or quarter? Or they might be asked, who is this? Or they might be asked, maybe what year, or whatever the case may be. Again, we felt that even though the students really enjoyed this test, especially taking this test in a citizenship class, because the photos were directly related to what they were studying, they really enjoyed the test themselves. However, we found that it was almost too low to get an accurate assessment for our students. So, but please take a look at this reading test, and hopefully people can find some use for this. The two tests that we like to really focus in on are the citizenship listening test. And what it is a multiple choice listening test. The students listen to 30 recorded questions based on the new 100 civics questions for the USCIS. Oh, and the questions are repeated twice. And they're repeated, they're paused, and they're repeated again. So the test takes approximately 20 minutes. Initially, we delivered this in a classroom setting, but now through e-testing, the students are able to take this on the e-test, and it's much more secure, and we get much better results from this. An example would be from the practice one. They're going to see the answers in front of them, and then they're going to hear the question, and they basically select the question, or they select the answer. So as you can tell from practice one question, probably the question was, practice question was, what colors are on the flag? And the choice would be red, white, and blue. However, when you get to practice test 2, you can't really say, or you can't really guess or anticipate what the answers could be. A lot of people, if you're thinking, oh, they're probably going to ask about who's the father of our country, of course everybody's going to gravitate towards George Washington. But maybe the question isn't that. Maybe the question is, name one of the writers of the Federalist Papers, or who wrote the Declaration of Independence, or who was the second president, or the first vice president. So again, they have constructed this test with a variety of answers that the student cannot automatically guess what the answer should be. So it's a very, very well constructed test. My students would love to take this test almost every class period if they possibly could. However, one of the frustrations with the test is that there's a pause, a significant pause. They would like so I've basically developed like instead of 30 questions, 10 questions, so as a practice for them. But they really enjoy this test. They really get a lot out of the listening test. The test that I really like to talk about is the Citizenship Interview test, or the CIT test. And so what it is this is going to be a one-on-one interview with a student, and you're basically assessing how their responses. So they're basically taking a look at the speaking skills of the adult ESL and citizenship learner. Again, you would probably, it would be really good here to maybe take a look at some of the speaking standards, CASAS speaking standards. It helps determine if individual is ready to basically participate in a USCIS Naturalization Interview. The target population is high beginning to advanced ESL students, and I have a link to further questions and answers here. Let me go back and make further comments about this slide. So when you take, is the CIT an absolute guarantee if the student is ready to take the test? No, but it gives a fairly accurate, a fairly, what I would say, it gives you a pretty good assessment where they are in how they understand spoken English that would probably appear on the naturalization test. And the target population, they say high beginning. I might put it maybe at low intermediate because of the use of colloquial language and the fact that they have to basically define some of the terms. However, is it doable for high beginning students? Absolutely. Do advanced students learn something when they take this assessment? They absolutely do. So I feel that this is a very valuable test because the students really find it interesting to hear the vocabulary, to hear the questions, and they were interested to see how appropriate their responses are. Let's talk about some of the competencies. And again, of course, you can take a look at CASAS competencies, but they assess their ability to understand small talk. Small talk is a very important element of the USCIS naturalization interview. When the examiner engages in small talk with the interviewee, they're trying to see what level is the student and how they should basically adjust their questioning themselves. The CIT basically employs multiple grammar structures and verb tenses, which is very important. So for instance, when I construct some of my own interviews, sometimes I construct the interviews to make use of maybe present tense, simple present, simple past, and maybe present perfect. However, sometimes the test employs passive voice. Sometimes they are employing present continuous. So they're basically incorporating more grammar structures, which is really interesting because CASAS assessments themselves are not grammar tests. They're basically seeing if the students can, they're basically testing or assessing competencies. They're not assessing their ability to do grammar problems. And also, which is probably the most valuable thing on the CIT, is that they're assessing the student's ability to understand the vocabulary on the N-400 application for naturalization. Now, since this has been the N-400 was updated in 2014 and again in 2016. The current CIT does not include some of the newer vocabulary. However, for basic test, for basic practice interview, this is a really great test. There is training required to administer this test. So what the student, what a teacher would do is through their agency, they would basically contact CASAS and do an online training program. And basically, the people have to be recertified every year. I'm personally glad that I have to do the recertification every year because it reminds me of sometimes, because I've been teaching ESL for so long, I've really attuned myself to certain accents, the Vietnamese accent, the Chinese accent, which is easy for me to understand. However, it might not be necessarily clear to a USC office examiner. I might be doing a lot more inference than I think I am doing. So again, this training helps me tune up my own ability to say, hey, are you inferring the answer, or did they actually give you the correct answer, an answer that the USCIS officer would understand? So again, simply doing the CIT training helps the teacher basically be a better assessor for the students who are participating in this. I want to talk about the test administration itself. It's a one-on-one interview format, and it follows the basic interview pattern approximately. The test administration is maybe 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I say 15 to 20, it's maybe about 10 to 15. And that's approximately the time that you would have during a USCIS interview. So this is an example of CIT anchors. So what you're doing is you're asking the questions and you're basically grading the response of this. So for instance, what is your home address? To get a high score or a best score, you would need to give your address, the city, the state, and the zip code. If you do not get the zip code, you're downgraded a point. And if they basically answer off topics, for instance, I live in a house, they would not receive any responses for that. An example of what the students, the most difficult part of the N-400 is what is known as Part 12, which is they're asking about additional information about you. They're basically, or what it used to be called was, they're trying to say, I think it used to be called good moral character. Now it's called Part 12, and all the students are listening for initially is have you ever, and when they hear that construct, they automatically say no, because they've associated this construct or this grammar construct with something that bad happened in the past and I didn't do it. So they're just going to say no. Now it's difficult sometimes, especially when you're practicing in class, to basically say, hey, student, do you really understand what I'm saying, or are you simply listening for keywords? And the keyword that I want you to be listening to is illegal drugs, but the keyword that you hear is have you ever. So what they do is the student has to, the examiner asks, or the teacher asks, have you ever sold or smuggled illegal drugs? The student is going to say no. But Then they follow up with they have a follow-up question, what are illegal drugs? And the student has to define what are illegal drugs. So they could give you, so you could get a full score if you give examples, 2 examples, like heroin or cocaine. If you just do something general, drugs that are against the law, you're only going to get partial credit. And if you say alcohol are not illegal drugs, you're not going to receive any credit at all. So again, they go through the main terms of the part 12. Again, war crime, the more recent war crimes vocabulary is not included, but the students are basically tested on some of the main or the more important vocabulary in part 12, and it's very, very important that they understand and what they're saying yes to and what they're saying no to. For example, sometimes I ask my students, have you ever sold or smuggled illegal drugs? And they say no. And I say, well, what are illegal drugs? And then they say, I don't know. So one of the things that I, as a teacher, have to tell my students preparing for citizenship is you can't say yes to something that you don't know what you're saying yes to, and you don't know what you're saying no to. You have the right to say, I don't understand this. Can you please explain it to me? But you have to ask the question before you say yes or no. So learning the whole strategy of asking for clarification questions is really important. Can you ask clarification questions during the CIT? You cannot. But in your preparation, in your classroom, when you're practicing the N-400, can you do it? Yes, you can. And when you basically, after going through the CIT and saying, hey, a lot of my students are missing information on have you ever been declared illegally incompetent, you know that you have to go back to your class and really address this vocabulary point. There's 4 things that I want to say that you have to be aware with on the CIT. It doesn't measure the knowledge of USCIS, US Civics. So remember, they have the listening test for that, okay? The vocabulary, I think it was based on the original pre-2014 N-400, so that doesn't have the new war crimes information. It did detours from the N-400's question sequence. So if you think about what happens on the N-400 application for naturalization or a standard citizenship interview, they ask you your personal information about your name and your country of origin. They ask you about your job, and then they ask you about the things about moral character. This does detour from that sequence because they ask you them questions about previous education, which is not asked on the N-400, and they might ask questions about the home country, about what you miss about that, about your home country. That might have appeared as a what is that called? Part of small talk. So anyway, so it doesn't perfectly follow the N-400 question sequence, and it occasionally uses colloquial English. So for example, they may ask a student about how do you make your living, and most students would respond, I live in San Jose or I live in Milpitas. So occasionally there is occasions for the use of colloquial English on this test that is very interesting to see how the students respond to that. And again, this is a point that can be addressed in the post test instruction. Now, the CIT caveats are also the CIT benefits, because yeah, it doesn't measure USCIS, the knowledge of US civics, but it refocuses the students on preparation of the N-400 application. I can't tell you, well, how many times students come in and they think that they're just here to memorize the 100 questions, but actually the students only get 10, they only have to answer 6 out of 10 questions from the 100 questions. And what most students fail on is they don't know how to respond to the questions on the N-400 application, because maybe it was translated for them, or maybe they had a lawyer do it for them, or a family member, so they're not prepared to talk about their own personal information in English. So again, CIT, one of the best benefits is that it refocuses the student preparation. The vocabulary is based on the on pre-2014 N-400 terms, but the students must learn the new vocabulary and must be able to explain that. Now, some of this stuff gets kind of esoteric. Some of the students are not happy to talk about genocide, but at least they need to know, and they need to know how to ask clarification questions during the interview if they don't know what it is before they answer yes or no. The fact that it detours from the questions sequence is that the students learn how to navigate interruptions and requests for further information in a safe environment. So if they practice this in the classroom setting, they are going to be able to do it, or they're much more better equipped to do this in the actual interview. And with the use of colloquial English, what is happening in the interview, the use of colloquial English in the CIT interview pops up in other interviews, and job interviews, or medical exams, or parent-teacher conferences. So the student is like, if they don't understand, what do you, how do you make your living? The student can stop and say, excuse me, did you mean where do I live, or are you asking about my job? It's okay to ask questions in that time. It basically shows that the person is strong and they're basically engaged in this interview. So the CIT caveats are basically the benefits for CIT, are basically the benefits of the CIT. I see that I only have a little bit more time, but I want to talk about CASAS EL Civics and the Naturalization Interview. We're going to talk about COAAPS, the EL Civics Objective 40, which is basically you're doing mock citizenship interviews in an ESL classroom, and I'm going to talk about COAAPS 19, which might be a good alternative to 40. EL Civics are additional assessments, and they're basically trying to connect the they're trying to give students further understanding about what's happening in society at large by doing basically research projects or analyzing information and connecting that with their own community experience, and then bringing that back into the classroom. So it turns out to be a very exciting project. This year, because of the election, we basically did, well, let's see, maybe I'm talking about this a little bit. Okay, no. I want to give an example of the breakdown of some COAAPS. They talk about consumer economics, so they have maybe 10 assessments about banking and housing, community resources, health and employment, government and law, and transitions. The one, as a citizenship teacher, I'm really excited about the government and law, but however, I am not doing COAAPS in my citizenship class. I am doing COAAPS in my ESL class. This year, because we did the election, and I was teaching basically a very low literacy class. We did EL Civics Objective 40. This is the goal. They're learning how to respond to history and government questions in order to be successful in the naturalization process. And we geared many of our questions to about voting and the election. And these are the focus areas. And there's a really great reference from CASAS about instructional materials. So please check out this PDF that I show you in this presentation. These are some of the objectives. And basically, they're trying to, let me see, were the ones that we were trying to do, we're trying to, for lower level, they're trying to write vocabulary words in dictated sentences. They were talking about the three branches of government, and we were talking about, particularly about the president, vice president, and the senators and representatives in connection to the election in 2016. Those questions were paired with level appropriate N-400 application questions. So for instance, on the lowest level, we gave our students 8 questions about what is your name, where do you live, do you work, those kind of things. And we paired that up with 2 civics questions from the USCIS 100 questions. So these were so they have a general overview of what's happening with the COAAPS 40. Now we get to choose what kind of tasks we want to do with that. We wanted to have an oral interview with our students. We did not want to have a written portfolio, and we basically wanted our students to go through mini mock interviews. And so here were some examples of some of the questions that they were asked. Let me step back to this. So this was really important for my ESL 1 class because some of my students have been here coming up on their 5 years. They have been fossilized in their English level ability, their English level. This they know that the citizenship interview is coming up and they're going to have to prepare for it. This was an opportunity for me to refocus some of their preparation that they were doing instead of walking around with very tattered copies of, or bilingual copies of the 100 questions. I got them to be able to answer more personal information and showed them increasingly more leveled approaches to the N-400 interview. So the students really appreciated that, and I basically was able to nudge some of my students towards basically stepping up on their English fluency. Another COAAPS that we have done in our school is that we have done COAAPS on immigrant rights, basically taking a look at the rights of the immigrants related to in the local and state agencies. So we were taking a look at legal assistance, and we were taking a look at some of our core documents from the Bill of Rights and our different amendments. These were especially appropriate in our ESL classes because there were lots of questions about where people can get resources and related to not only legal assistance, but also for food, for information about healthcare, how to negotiate with healthcare. Housing is a really, really big problem in Milpitas and San Jose. So those kind of questions were coming up, and identifying those kind of agencies were really important for us. If you need to hear more about EL Civics, please take a look at this document or this presentation for CASAS. And I want to talk about 2 more resources from CASAS. The quick search which is basically you can basically choose. You want to take a look at the citizenship assessments. You want to take a look at reading or listening. You want to focus on citizenship, and they can suggest appropriate websites or textbooks or whatever the case may be. So CASAS Quick Search is a really great way to identify particular resources that can be used in your classrooms, your ESL classrooms. I also want to, so this might be, this is an appropriate result. So what's the number one thing that they're taking a look at? They're basically pointing us to OTAN and all the information that they have related to citizenship and citizenship and civics. And also CASAS Bibliography of Citizenship Materials. This is an older resource, but it's also a goodie resource, because just because a civics textbook is old doesn't mean it's no longer valid. Sometimes they have especially appropriate material in those older textbooks. Of course, some of the material needs to be updated, but so anyway, and also a lot of times if it's referring to an older textbook in the bibliography, you may have actually the newer textbook in your own classroom, and you can go and access that information. I want to talk about one further resource. COAAP has its own app that you can download and keep track of the latest developments in adult basic education. And I would like just to finish up, if we do have a lever long enough. We have all these resources. We have USCIS, we have COAAP, we have CASAS, OTAN, we have our teachers, our students, we have mobile technology, social media, and we have, most importantly, you. And that's the thing that's going to be able to lift the world. If you want more information about CASAS, please visit them at casas.org. I meant to say at the very beginning of this presentation, I do not work for CASAS. I'm simply a teacher in a classroom in Northern California using their assessments and using their assessments to inform how I teach my students. And the students use the information from the assessments to basically refocus and fine-tune their own studies. And when they're able to target their learning, they're able to achieve their goals, and their goal is citizenship. Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your afternoon with me. Bye-bye.
So Jennifer, thank you so much for that. And now we're going to turn this over to Terry Lifke for a couple of words, and then I'm just looking to see if we have any questions. We don't have any. So folks, if you have questions while Terry is talking, you're welcome to post them in the chat box or in the questions and answers box. Okay, Terry.
Hi, everybody. I showed you the books in the beginning if you were here with us, and they really fit well with what Jennifer was saying. So again, we have a full suite of citizenship materials at New Readers Press. They are aligned to CASAS, and we try to keep them as up to date as possible. Civics and literacy, we just updated some photos. We don't have all the photos for the new administration, but President Trump is now in our civics and literacy book. And Ready for the Interview is up to date with the latest N-400. And for those of you who are going to be at COAAP with Sharon next week, we will be there, and we have two of our authors doing presentations. Cynthia Campbell is going to talk about our new WorkWise series. These are 3 workbooks that cover soft skills at a low level. And then Leah Conklin-Olson will also be with us talking about teacher's guides for getting your English language learners up to speed with the GED test prep. So it's using New Readers Press GED test prep materials, but then these books will help to fill in the gaps that ELLs need to get up to speed for the test. So that's it. Stop by the booth and see us, and come to our presentations, and I can't wait to get to Orlando.
Sharon, do you mind if I share my screen again?
Oh,
Because I
sure.
want to follow up on something from New Readers Press. 1 minute. 1 second. Almost there. Let's see, where am I? Okay, can I go ahead and share it? Yeah? Is that okay? Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Jennifer. Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about one more resource from New Readers Press that you can see my name scrawled on the bottom of my book. Okay, which I think is invaluable. Holding the Bag, and it's about it's a novel scenes book. It's about a taxi driver from Ethiopia. He's lived in the United States, in Washington, and he works in Washington, D.C. He accidentally becomes involved in a robbery. So one of the reasons why I use this in my citizenship class is because as he's driving through Washington, D.C., he goes through the Jefferson Memorial. He'll go to the different monuments. So of course, that's an occasion to talk about citizenship. But what's very real in this is that how he responds to his robbery, and that's the thing that my students find the most compelling thing about this book, is that he has a flashback to some of the trauma that he had in Ethiopia. So my students say this is an invaluable book, and anything that's coming out of from Anna Gianella is really, really valuable. So I can't recommend this stuff enough. I also wanted to talk about 2 other apps. One is from ACLU, because a lot of why I want to talk about this is that all the stuff from New Readers Press, such as Holding the Bag, it's now available for download. So for approximately $5, the students can download the books to their cell phones, and students really like holding it in their hands and reading it that way. So that's been very valuable for my students. Another thing that's, again, very important for mobile technology, we have ACLU has put out a series of apps for California and for all the states about how to respond to basically recording incidences about what happens in society. If they see a problem, they can record what's going on. It also informs them of their rights. California Council for Education has a really great app basically geared towards our Ledge Day. And what's Ledge Day is Legislative Action Day, where adult schools visit our state capitol and contact our state representatives about impending legislation. This app was based on, of course, the COAAPS app, basically, that's connecting the different adult education centers. USA Gov has a really great mobile apps directory that I can't recommend enough for all the different federal agencies. I have my own app, but I wanted to talk about these. Wait a minute, I need to stop sharing my screen. Where is it? Stop sharing the screen. Pause share. No, resume share. It's because all this stuff is available on my website, and I'm really happy to be able to share this information with you guys. That's it. Okay, back to you.
Great. Jennifer, there's a question here. Can you please show the slide for holding the bag again?
Sure. 1 second. Excuse me.
And if not, Jennifer, just when you send me the PowerPoint, we'll make sure it goes up on the COAAP website.
Oh yeah, I got it right now. 1 second.
Okay. Great.
There we go. Okay. Share screen. And I think it's this one. Oh, sorry. There it is. I can't recommend this book enough. Please go to New Readers Press. Check out their mobile novels. A lot of great stuff on New Readers Press. Also, I think if New Readers Press has training for new citizenship teachers that a new citizenship teacher can go through. So you would have to get a membership. I understand the membership is free, and then you could go through those lessons. And so I've listened to some of the podcasts and from Lynn Weintraub and some of her associates. And again, I just get so much out of her teaching. So I really appreciate New Readers Press for sharing that information.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, the citizenship training is on proliteracy.org.
Oh, I'm sorry, Proliteracy. So that's your
okay.
parent company, right?
Yeah.
Proliteracy is the parent company of New Readers Press?
Yes, proliteracy.org will connect you to Education Network, and that's where the citizenship course is.
Okay, great.
Wonderful. And I have one other question here. Will we be able to have a document showing some kind of recognition that they attended this webinar? Yes, everybody on this webinar will receive a certificate of attendance that you can use towards your CEUs, and that will go out tomorrow around 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So on behalf of everybody here, I just want to thank you all for making the time to attend. I'd like to thank our wonderful sponsor, New Readers Press, as well as our expert presenter, Jennifer Gagliardi, and thank you all who took the time, and we hope to see you at COAAP 2017 in just a week. Thanks, everybody.
Yay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.